Bobby Funk, and Marcia Parrott is on her way. So there's 4 of us here, and we're just available to answer any questions one-on-one. And then at 6 o'clock, there'll be a presentation.
I'm with the Development Finance Initiative, or DFI, with the UNC School of Government. Thank you for coming. I want to introduce members of the team. Rory Dowling is the Development Advisor, Senior Project Manager with this project. Sarah Odio, you'll hear a lot from tonight, is the Project Manager who's been working hard on this document, and Bobby Funk is a graduate fellow with us. Also want to acknowledge the Director of Community Development from the City of Rocky Mount, Landis Bartone is here, as well as Councilmember Knight and Mayor Combs. Thank you for coming. Sarah is going to give a 15-minute or so presentation with a lot of details about the project. I'm going to ask, I know it's going to be hard for you to hold your questions until she's done, just because a question might come up that she's probably going to answer, but we'll have plenty of time for questions afterwards, so write them down, note them, but please hold them until the end. And without further ado, I think y'all are ready to hear it, so I'll let her go. Thank you.
And I will add thank you all for coming out today. I know 5 o'clock on Tuesday is not the best time.
Probably do, right?
Help.
Does that work?
No? Yeah, it's on.
Hello?
There you go.
Great, that's fantastic. All right, so the plan for today is I am going to start by giving you an introduction of who we are. So why is the Development Finance Initiative at the UNC School of Government here today, talking about a City of Rocky Mount site. And then I'll give you an update on the public-private partnerships for housing project. So you'll hear all the details. We've already heard a lot of questions today from the group, and I hope to be able to answer a lot of these in the presentation. Then we'll talk about next steps, and then we'll open it up for a more formal question and answer session at the end of this. So the UNC School of Government is one of the largest research and advisory local government training facilities in the U.S. So on an annual basis, the School of Government team is serving, I think it's 16,000 public officials across North Carolina. We are very much a nonpartisan, policy-neutral, responsive entity. And we think of ourselves as being really in the bloodstream of state and local government. We advise local governments. You're elected officials. Anyone here who ever gets elected, you'll probably come through our doorstep. Or if you've ever worked for local government, you've probably stepped foot at the School of Government at some point. And we provide expertise on issues ranging from animal control through to real estate development. And that's really where DFI comes in. So DFI, the Development Finance Initiative, which I'll call DFI, is a program of this UNC School of Government. And we were created to provide real estate development and finance expertise for local governments. So as I said, for many, many, many years, the local government, the School of Government has been providing this expertise to local governments related to legal issues. And we had staff at School of Government getting phone calls on a regular basis saying, hey, this developer just approached us and they said that they would do XYZ if we give them $1 million. Should we do this? And the staff at the School of Government, they were able to answer the question of, can we do that? So legally, can you hand them $1 million? No. But they couldn't really answer the question of, should you be investing in this project? And so the more and more questions that were received along those lines, the more the need for DFI really emerged. We were also getting questions like, hey, and I know Rocky Mount has this, a lot of these really great historic buildings. Hey, we have this abandoned building. It's on the city books. We've been sitting on it for 20 years, and nobody wants to invest in it. What do we do about this? And again, the local School of Government will say, well, this is what you can do, but not what you should do. So enter DFI to answer those questions about what local governments should do when it comes to responding to developer interest in their community, but also in attracting the type of private investment that really meets the public interests. Put this thing down for some reason. So as you can see, we worked in communities all across North Carolina. And for that reason, the North Carolina Emergency Management approached DFI when they were trying to think of a different approach to leverage their state recovery money to attract private investment into some of these communities that were struggling to see any kind of investment related to housing. And that's key here. So this was created to build affordable housing for low and moderate income households in communities impacted by Hurricane Matthew. So as most of you, or a lot of you know, Edgecombe County is one of the 4 most impacted communities in Eastern Carolina and North Carolina. So the process that was created for this P3s for Housing program, which is what we called it, so public-private partnerships for housing, is that the first step was really to identify sites suitable for affordable housing development in these communities impacted by Hurricane Matthew. And the key here is we're talking about resilience. We're not talking about rebuilding homes in the flood zone so that they continue to be at risk of flooding over and over again. We're talking about finding sites outside the 100-year, outside the 500-year, where we could talk about long-term rental options for the low and moderate income households. The next step in the public-private partnerships for housing is to do a feasibility analysis, which is the core of what DFI's work is. So what is actually feasible? What will actually attract a private developer to do the type of development we're talking about? And what does the public investment need to be to make this work? And the last step in the process is, we don't just hand over a report. We actually go out and we find a private development partner to execute on the type of projects that we're talking about. So for the P3s for housing, when thinking about where to locate these projects and to select sites, we established a set of criteria. And not surprisingly, since we're talking about hurricane recovery, we wanted sites that were outside the 100 and 500-year flood zone. We wanted a minimum of 48 units. We're talking about high-impact development. Public ownership was key here, or a clear path to site control. So maybe private ownership where the local government had been having previously conversations with that owner and was in a place where they could move on site control. Really important here was existing connections to public utilities. That can take a lot of time and a lot of money. And one of the goals here was to move pretty efficiently and pretty quickly. We wanted sites that were suitable for residential development. It may not surprise you that often people come to us and they say, hey, we've got this great site, and it's just an industrial site in the middle of nowhere, where you're not thinking about residential development in any way. And then, of course, we wanted developments that were going to meet the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency's site requirements. For this project, we're talking about using tax credits, and those are federal tax credits to develop these projects, along with state recovery money, so not local funds. And so any site that we selected had to meet the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency's site requirements. So, as you know, and as I've mentioned to a lot of you today, the City of Rocky Mount actually submitted multiple sites for consideration. Many that met this criteria, however, there were challenges here and there for different reasons. One example of North Carolina Housing Finance Agency's requirements is proximity of amenities. So I've got a whole list here, but it includes things, the neighborhood, the quality of the neighborhood, bus transit within walking distance. And you can see here the site, which is, if anybody doesn't know, by the way, the site we're talking about is right across the street. And you can see it here right in the middle. And we're looking for grocery stores, pharmacies, health centers, shopping within a mile or a mile and a half from the site. So this is the site. It is an Edgecombe County side of the city of Rocky Mount, really in the core of downtown. So a zoom in onto that site there. These are the city-owned parcels only. So that parcel has multiple ownership, including Edgecombe Community College. This would not include the Edgecombe Community College site. And on February 25th, something key here is that the city of Rocky Mount voted that they were prepared to sell or lease the land for the development of affordable housing if the right development partner is identified. So they have not already agreed, hey, we're not selling it tomorrow. That's not what they agreed to do. They're not saying, hey, it has to be this. They're saying, if we find the right partner, and this is the right project, we're comfortable moving forward with affordable housing on this site. So that first step, identifying the site. The second step is DFI's feasibility analysis. So what you see here is what is a kind of typical pre-development process feasibility analysis for a private development partner, or at least three parts of it are. First thing we do is we look at the market. So what is the demand for the type of product we're talking about here, in this case affordable housing? So how many households were displaced by Matthew, and how much unmet need exists in this community still? We then look at the site. So what can actually fit on a site? How many units can you actually build? How much parking is required? Stormwater, all those really boring things. All of that goes into this analysis. Then we do a financial analysis. And this is where we determine, okay, for a private developer to take on this project, they would need to achieve these returns, or in this case, this development fee. And these kind of financials would need to be in order. We do that work, just kind of a base case, and we figure out what is the gap. So if the state wants to see this project happen in other communities, if our local government partner wants to see this project happening, what is the public investment that needs to be provided? And so in this case, to be very clear, the state would be providing that gap financing. And so of course with affordable housing, there's almost always a gap. What DFI does in their process that is different from what a private developer would do is that we incorporate the public interests into any one of these. So we are constantly in conversation with staff and council, and we come to you in these community meetings and we ask to hear from you what it is you're looking for in this kind of development. And at the crux of all of that is what we call a feasible project. I'll show you some of the work here, some of our key findings for that market analysis portion. Post-Hurricane Matthew flood impact, there were over 530 homes with major to severe damage from Matthew. Roughly half of those were low-income renters. There's about an estimated 450 renters with moderate damage, which means a lot of them were able to stay, or most stayed in their home. They still remain at risk of flooding, and that is key. The majority, again, here are low and moderate income households. We also needed to look at what the unmet demand for affordable housing is in Rocky Mount in general, right? Not just Hurricane Matthew, but what's the demand for affordable housing? You'll hear me talk about AMI a lot. That is the area median income. And technically, the area median income in Edgecombe County is $53,000. And that's for a family of four. For a two-person household at 60% AMI, so you've heard me, and if you looked at the poster, we're talking about a 60% AMI targeted project here, potentially. That would be an income of $25,000, $26,000, right? So if you are a single mom with a child, single dad, just a couple with only one working partner, you could be working as a firefighter, you could actually be working as a child care worker, and you would qualify, nursing assistant, for example, and you would qualify for this housing. DFI identified unmet demand, and so we based this on severely cost-burdened households. That means these are households that are spending more than 50% of their income on housing costs. And right now in Rocky Mount, there are about 1,700 rental units in demand for units for households that earn 30% of AMI or below. And between that 30% and 80% segment, there are about 1,300 rental units in demand. 45% of these households, these severely cost-burdened households, are small families, and 24% are single elderly households. An additional, and this is 2015 data, we believe that this has actually increased over time, an additional 200 households are living in substandard housing. That means they don't have full plumbing, they don't have full kitchen facilities, and about 145 in overcrowded units. That means more than 2 people per room in a unit. We know that market rents in Rocky Mount, as you see more and more development, market rents are going up and it's outpacing your income growth. When that happens, that means the demand will only go up. So, that was the market analysis piece in our analysis. How many units can we build, should we build, and for whom? The site analysis, as I said before, is just a test fit, right? We look at the development limitations to a site. So you can have lots of ideas, but if you're building in Rocky Mountain in a historic district, we can't go up 6 floors. So part of our analysis is determining how high can we go, how many units can we fit, how wide can we go, what's required. Part of the purpose of the site analysis is not to create a kind of final guiding document. So if you've had a chance to look at this, this is not what this project is going to look like. This is to say, hey, we're looking for a more urban development, right? We want this to fit the character of downtown Rocky Mount. And so what you see here is an idea amassing to see, can we fit that kind of project, that kind of design on the site that we have in front of us. Again, no architectural details involved here. So here it is, the colors, they wouldn't have been my choice, but they indicate the unit size that we looked at and fitting in there. This is 60 units, affordable at 60% AMI. The rents on these projects, and I think there's often a misconception around these tax credit and affordable housing projects, is that they are free, that it is public housing, that tenants don't pay anything and don't need to work. Rents are still between $400 and $550 a month. So it is not free rent. The total development cost here is about $8.5 to $9 million to develop this project. I just wanted to show some examples of LIHTC development in North Carolina. You guys may recognize this of Beale Street. What's really important here is that part of the reason these costs seem pretty high is that the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency actually establishes very strict guidelines for tax credit projects, which is what we would be pursuing for this. And they require certain high quality materials and construction methods that have to be used across the state in order to be awarded these projects. They must also meet green building standards. So in communities where utilities are high, this is incredibly important. And the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency remains involved throughout the 30-year affordability of this project and monitors these projects to ensure that they remain compliant. So they don't allow projects to fall into shambles. They're making sure that they still maintain these high standards. So these are just some other examples of projects in North Carolina. Good finishes, solid quality materials. So what's the next step from here? So DFI, we would go out and solicit a qualified private development partner for this project. We are going to look far and wide. So our work here, part of what DFI does, as you saw, we've done these projects all across North Carolina. We have a lot of relationships with developers all across the state. But we are also constantly working to expand those relationships and find developers that meet the needs of these communities. And so part of our work here will be going out and finding qualified development partners and having a competitive process where we will go out and say, submit your qualifications, let us know why you're interested in this project, and show us your experience. Show us that you have experience developing and, key here, managing successful projects in North Carolina and The city council will have a vote on who that development partner could be from that group that submits, and so will the state. So the city and the North Carolina Office of Recovery and Resilience will have a vote here and select a preferred partner. When that partner is selected, that doesn't mean the partner is going to go off and just start doing the work. They'll enter into MOU negotiations. And this is the point in which the city and NCORP really sets the stage and says, hey, these are our requirements. This is what we're going to need from you as a developer in this process. And the developer does the same thing, and they come to an MOU. And that developer will then have a period of exclusivity to invest money to see what kind of project can be done. The pre-development process for the developer after that will include finalizing the plan and design. They're not just, it's not that you'll never see them again. You are going to have an opportunity, just like in any development in your community, in any planning process, where the city will have to review any plans. That will still happen. And then the developer is expected to go out and secure project financing. So that's going to be the low-income housing tax credits and the state funds. Again, we have not asked the city to contribute any additional funds to this project. Their kind of skin in this game is the land, which is critical, let me say, to this development. And to be very clear, this is a private developer that will own and operate the development for the life of the project and its affordability. This is kind of a rough timeline of what the next, 8 months looks like. We were hoping, if the council and staff is comfortable with us moving forward, to put out a solicitation by the end of April and selecting a partner in June to move pretty quickly to get to a development breaking ground the following year in June, potentially second quarter, third quarter of 2020. So, questions?
There were so many good questions at the beginning.
What are some of the specs on the green building?
The specs on the green building is the question.
I'm going to blank right now, but there's a green building standard. There's a certification, a green building certification that you have to meet. It's the standard. It's not LEED, but there's a green building certification.
We'll get you her business card and we'll send it to you. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Of all the sites, I can speak loud.
Yes.
Of all the sites the city owns in Rocky Mount, Edgecombe County, why was this site selected for this project? There are others within the same area. Why was this site selected?
Good question. We asked the city to submit sites that they would be prepared to contribute to an affordable housing development. They submitted 3 sites. This was one of them. We evaluated each of them independently, and we decided that this one, it more so became the other sites had a lot of challenges, and this site had a lot of benefits, including.
What were the other 2 sites, and what were the challenges?
We looked at crossings at 64.
And what's the challenge then?
The challenge there was the site was quite big. It needed a lot of infrastructure investment, and the state financing that was available was not sufficient to make that investment worthwhile.
Okay, and the other site?
The other site was the Planters Mill, and that was going to need, it's a brownfields, that was going to need a lot of kind of upfront investment just to remediate it. Environmental challenges.
So those were the only sites they submitted,
So those were the only sites that were submitted,
even though
yes.
they own other properties within this area?
I can ask the city if they want to discuss kind of those priorities. I'm
Well,
happy to
they
hand
are
that
here.
over. Landis?
I can respond to that. This particular site was selected because it is in the downtown area, an area where we have some economic activity that's underway. Housing is going to be a driving economic factor for increasing density downtown. We want something that's going to bring people here and keep them here. We are looking for housing opportunities to meet the diverse needs of our residents here downtown as we work to enhance economic vitality in this area.
Well, I spoke at a city council meeting, and when I spoke at that meeting, I said that the Edgecombe Community College as a John trustee, and I believe Dr. McLeod was here, though he wasn't president at that time, we bought that property that we own next to your parcel in collaboration with the city for the sole purpose of parking in the event the college grows and for the event center parking. That's why we bought it. We did not buy, not that we're against housing, I'm all for housing, all for it, but not there. That's my take as a trustee of Edgecombe Community College.
You bought it for several reasons.
Speak up.
I said the city bought it for several reasons, meaning that we saw potential in downtown. That's one reason why we advocated and built the event center. We wanted to bring our downtown back to life and big party. And so the city owns a lot of property in downtown. And so I know that at one point that parking was anticipated, but there's other lots or other locations where parking can be developed as well. So we bought that property for potential development.
When we purchased that project, in collaboration with the city manager at that time, who was Charles Kenny, we discussed it. If you buy this, we buy this for parking.
I'm not gonna get into tips and tax.
Let's move on to the next question.
I'm not, but what I'm saying is, the plan changed, and it doesn't mean that,
Our plan can change.
well, it may not have, but as you serve on different boards, and sometimes you have forecast for something to be a particular thing, and then you end up changing it, doesn't mean that it's etched in stone. And so at one point, we were talking about parking. And at some point, we were also talking about housing all over downtown. So it depends upon, you know, if you have Dr. Lamb, now you have Dr. McLeod. And so his vision may change from what Dr. Lamb may have had. But it doesn't mean that it's right or wrong.
His vision is that of the trustees. The trustees manage.
Wow.
My name is Jesse. I represent Largerco, which owns a lot of properties right around here in 5 Points, Stalford Building, Main Gorham, the Tripp Furniture Building. My friend Maliki, who is beside me, owns the other neighboring properties, and there are a couple other landowners around here. I want to say, first of all, we all support housing downtown, all types of housing downtown. It is important for the vibrancy of a downtown that there are people living here and walking around and participating in downtown life. However, Rocky Mount already has a parking problem, and we have already made multiple millions of dollars of investment in this downtown, and we are looking at further millions of dollars of investment in downtown. And taking away parking where there is the most growth we have seen in the downtown core up until this point strangles that sort of development. So I don't know what the process was to choose this, but we have been saying for about 12 months now that this is not the right location, and we should not take away parking where there already is parking, because there's not a lot of it. And we urge City Council, City Manager, DFI to reconsider this lot. Thank you.
Yeah, I own the property just right across the street from here. And we bought it originally because I own 3 restaurants in Durham, downtown Durham, and we see a lot of potential in Rocky Mount. It's a great town, and I think it can be great. So we originally thought that we'd have 3 restaurants in that area, and we thought the parking lot would help. I know that was never set in stone, but we were under the impression that we would have parking. By taking this parking away would definitely, you know, I've only invested in, I bought the property, I'm paying the mortgage, but we haven't put a lot of money into it yet, but it's something that I would definitely, I would definitely reconsider developing if that's not there anymore.
All right. I wanted to share some information too earlier about the question about site selection with crossing at 64. One thing is it did not meet the NCHFA requirement of having a grocery store within a couple miles, so that was one of the challenges.
As far as parking goes here in the downtown area, there are plenty of sites where parking can be located and still have access to these businesses, access to the downtown area. Take, for example, right down the street from this site where we are proposing housing, you have the old Piggly Wiggly parking lot. That is a huge area where you could also have adjacent parking for the event center, for the downtown businesses, and it's in walking distance. No one's gonna be inconvenienced by walking another block or so, because you do it when you go to Raleigh, and you do it when you go to other cities. So I personally am for this housing project because we have too many people that are without affordable housing, decent quality living standards, and where some don't drive. Just take, for example, our senior citizens. Our senior citizens might want to take part and be a resident of that building. Then they're able to catch the bus, they're able to walk, and they don't have to depend on anybody. They are still able to have their independence.
Are there folks that have questions about, I understand there's a lot of discussion around this. Are there questions while we have Sarah here and being an expert in this program specific to the project?
Good evening. The question I have is about the incomes of people who will qualify. So we've been talking about the 60% area median income. My understanding is that's the cap, that's the most people can make. But people still have to be able to afford the $400 to $550 rent. So do you have any numbers about what's the minimum amount of income people will have who will qualify?
So households cannot spend more than 30% of their income, 35% of their income on their housing. So that's going to be that minimum threshold in order to qualify. So if you have a household coming in and they're spending 50% of their income to afford that $400, that's not going to be okay. So it's part of the management process.
I was going to say, speaking of income, are there any other qualifiers that you are aware of? Like would you rent any other apartment, like first month's rent, last month's rent, credit history, all these qualifiers, not just income?
Okay, well, in this project, I will say, so her question was, are there any other qualifiers to rent these apartments? I'll say for this project specific, there is going to be a priority for households displaced by Hurricane Matthew. That doesn't mean it's going to be exclusive, right? Because maybe we don't fill the whole project, but it's going to be prioritized, right? So that's first. Other than that, it's project by project. It's a management level thing. There are certain standards that NCHFA does set and requirements there that you'll have to meet.
The 400, 500 rent range, does that include utilities?
That excludes utilities. So a household cannot spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs for rent, which includes utilities. So that 400 to 550 is excluding typical utility costs in Rocky Mount.
We're there, and then there, and there. But first the back.
How long does the private partner need to own it before they're able to sell it?
How long do they have to own it? So the period of affordability is 15 years with a 15-year renewal, and typically developers will remain in the ownership position for that 30-year period, as long as the tax credits are in the project.
Can you talk about the qualifier as far as the feasibility of the financing base case, which is like the state Recovery and Resilience has committed to financing the proposed 60-unit project. Are they gonna finance the whole project? When you say that the city would not have any money in it, so they're gonna have a private contractor that's qualified, and they will be paying that, private owner the money to finance the whole thing, because this is what the legislature is.
Yeah, so the question is the state going to finance the entire project? Right, so no, not the entire project. So the developer of this project will be expected to apply for 4% low-income housing tax credit, which will provide about 30%, 27 to 30% of the total project costs. And the state will then finance the remaining gap for the total development costs. As you know, there is income coming into the project, so the income itself will actually operate the project over the life of it. So it will not be the, it won't be the state financing it for 30 years. It will be a privately, the income will cover your expenses for the project. The city, in their case, they would be conveying the land, and that would be the extent of their participation in this project.
Can I ask a question? If the city and Edgecombe Community College, they're the two property owners?
No.
Just the city.
Just the city? Okay, if the city don't approve, then the project dead?
It's their land.
Okay, so in other words, then the private partnership got to come through the city. They got to present something to the city to approve it.
Yes, correct. So the city, the private developer will have to enter an agreement with the city in order to get that land for the project.
Have this been done anywhere else, or is Rocky Mount being used as a guinea pig for this type of project?
Has this been done anywhere else?
Yeah.
The tax credit project?
No, I know about the tax credit. I'm
Okay.
talking about the DFI. Have they selected another city in which this similar near downtown?
You mean like the state partnership or
Yeah.
just in general?
The state partnership.
The state.
Yeah, so we're also working with Lumberton, Goldsboro, and Kinston at this point.
Okay.
They're at different points in the process. And they're not all downtown sites, because each community has different priorities.
But for example, we are working DFI, not with the state as a partner, with Durham County right now to do a large-scale affordable housing project in their downtown. So
But P3 for housing is a pilot project to respond to Hurricane Matthew.
Okay.
I feel like you in the corner, you've been waiting, gentlemen in the very corner. Yeah.
Does a displaced homeowner, does that mean a homeowner whose house was totally destroyed by Hurricane Matthew and they cannot move back, or one that had high water or maybe some damage, but they were able to repair and move back in?
So a displaced renter, so this project will be for renters that were displaced.
Renters only.
And that will be for those that were unable to move back, but also those that continue to live in homes that are at risk of getting flooded again after, another disaster.
Was there, was there always a requirement for new construction, or was existing buildings ever an option? I don't know if that's a question for some of the city folks here.
Yes, so the question is, was new construction the only option, or were we also looking at existing buildings? Yes, existing buildings were definitely in the mix, because you can do rehab for these projects, and that's definitely something we also consider.
It does add time, though, when you talk about particularly historic buildings, going through that process. That was all.
This lady in the green, and then go ahead.
This seems to be predicated on the idea that this is the best way to take care of our housing problem. And I think if you had come to us, the taxpayers, that you would have found that not only are we in a situation where we have no confidence if there were a vote, there would be a vote of no confidence in our city officials at the moment until we get these things straightened out. And the idea that this is the way to take care of seniors, first-time buyers, singles, retired people, is a notion that is, for us, is not necessary. We have neighborhoods that are at risk. We have, you know, there isn't any reason to put that over there when we can place people in neighborhoods that need to be brought back, that need to put, not stop them down, you know, in some sort of segregated, you know, area here, but put them in neighborhoods where the neighborhoods can come back, neighbors can start caring about one another again. The city doesn't need to be, thank goodness you talked about this, because we're not interested in having the city be in the real estate business anymore. And so, as much as this is a, you know, a topic that is all across the country, that, you know, affordable housing is certainly our, you know, our concern too. But this is not the way to go about it. And I'm sorry you've gone to the trouble of this, because it's not going to happen. It's absolutely, we're absolutely committed to the idea that this fabulous architecture we have, whether it may be in lousy condition, and it may need a coat of paint, and it may need being brought up to code, but it's ours. And it represents a story. It is part of Rocky Mountain's history. We want the diversity of having this person is a young person, first time in the job market. This person is a retired person and will act like a grandmother. I mean, we want the whole scope of this, not just plopping people down that are in a situation in their life at the moment where affordable housing is all that is open to them. We want it. The city needs to be in the process of enforcing ordinances. We want down, people are building lofts right now. Troy Davis is going to take a building where people can live on the shops. And how wonderful would that be to have for some of these people? And in Edgecombe and in Villa. And we can do this with what we've got by saving these architectural pieces that were built to last for a long time. And we can save these neighborhoods by putting people back in them where they can care about one another. And as I say, I'm sorry you've gone to all this trouble. This isn't what we want. And we're sensitive to needs that are out there. We know about the growing housing market all over the country. But we need to do it our way for what is going to be best for Rocky Mountain. And until we have the confidence again of our city government and we have a vote of confidence that we know where these issues have been settled, this is the last thing we need to be doing. And so I'm just making a plea that we've got the architecture and the assets all over the city. And if we would pay as much attention to that in these impoverished neighborhoods, that would go a long way to providing us what we need. So my answer to all of this is thank you, but no thank you.
I did hear sort of a question there, though, which is why do this multifamily development when you have these great neighborhoods with these great quality houses that need rehabbing? I'm going to call out the initiative here that is doing some amazing work. And there are a lot of groups doing some amazing work on that single-family rehab level in Rocky Mount, which is very much needed. But every community needs a range of housing options. This is one option that Rocky Mount has very little of and is in desperate need of. These rental housing options are a step in the ladder to get households out of poverty. So that is how we look at this. This is not a lifetime approach. It is silly. And so what this project gives them is an opportunity to have stability at a certain point in their lives, maybe while they're attending Edgecombe Community College and trying to do something, make some changes. And so we want to provide the range of housing options. This is one of many that need to be made available.
Well, can you do, your organization do housing in relation to what she was talking about in terms of the same thing you're doing here in developing a single project. Do you also do housing, individual house type of development?
I say we do. I know that Marcia has been working on it in Kinston and a land banking model there. I will say in Rocky Mount, though, you have groups that are doing this. You have groups that are actively doing this work. As I've said, the initiative is one of them.
That's not something you do.
So we do, but it's not needed in Rocky Mount. You have a group doing that here. We are taking a different approach for your
Oh,
state.
Jesus.
We certainly can provide technical assistance and talk more about it. And we agree that neighborhood revitalization is an important part of the strategy and talk more about code enforcement and all the tools local governments have. I think it's important too. I want to respect the board.
First is that I thank you for coming here and explaining what this is all about. And I do want to express the view that there are many of us who do not feel the same way as the young lady over there.
Thank you.
That there's no confidence in the city government. There are a lot of
Thank
people
you.
who felt that what you're talking about came as a result of many years of community people talking to the city officials, pushing for affordable housing, and this is only one of few projects that we're looking for, and apart from revitalization of neighborhoods. So I want to stress very strongly that in spite of the fact that you think that the city is divided, we are not as divided as some other people think. And this, like I said before, has been to some extent a culmination of many, many years of hard work by many community members who are here right now and who are interested in getting this thing done so we can have at least a part of this affordable housing to our people. Thank you.
Thank you. Likewise, I want to say that I want to thank you all for coming. And your time is not wasted. And no, everybody does not feel that way. I certainly wish that we would have had something in place like this when I was in the flood and had to stay in a small trailer for over 3 years because my home caught a fire. So I think that this is very much needed, and also being a property owner downtown and building a business downtown, I think that we need affordable housing because those are the ones that's going to come and spend their money with us.
I welcome the diversity of ideas. That's what we need. We need to work together. But all the presenters, I wish I could hear them. I wish Mike would try so I can hear what they're talking about. Some of them have good ideas that I need to hear.
Do my best. I know you had your hand up for a while.
I think everybody can hear me. I'm walking all the way up here. It seems to be that everybody agrees we need housing. The problem that a lot of people have is where it's been proposed to, right? So I got a question for you, Dr. Falcone, since you were involved in the early stages of this last year in the summertime. You're also involved in the hotel project and where that would be located. And in the hotel project information, Mr. Hunt, who's developing that for the city, said that he wants housing nearby. So was this site selected to satisfy that requirement from Mr. Hunt that there be houses near where he plans to put retail and everything?
No, when we first started looking at this project, Mr. Hunt was not in the picture. This was probably back in January. Can everybody hear me?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, this was back in January of last year when we learned of the opportunity through DFI. I believe we started talking with Mr. Hunt in the spring.
When the summertime, did he contact you first or you contacted him?
Mr. Hunt came to Rocky Mount with the entrance.
Okay, thank you.
I just wanted to know if there is any requirement for housing displaced people in this project. I know that the funding is coming for that reason, but are there any requirements that a certain percentage of the apartment be for displaced people?
There's a requirement that we prioritize households that are displaced. Prioritizing means that you need to reach out to households, as many as you can, because it's reach out to households, market these units to households that have been displaced. It is all part of how you manage it and prioritize it.
Gentleman in the black sweater.
What's the selection process for the development partner? Is there an application, is it selection? And what are the criteria? Is it liquidity, is it bonding, years of experience? Can you just speak a little bit about that?
Great. The process is we will draft a solicitation for development partners. It's similar to an RFQ, but DFI will go out and identify developers locally, regionally, nationally who qualify for these projects. Qualification, our minimum qualification is we're going to be looking for developers that have experience with 4% low-income housing tax credit bond deals, which are more challenging to a certain extent, or a different challenge than a 9% deal, which is a different tax credit that's bigger. And we're also looking for developers that have experience with federal funding, so have done a project before that have received CDBG, for example. That is minimum qualifications. Above and beyond that, we are looking at things like years of experience. Years of experience with the kind of development that we are talking about here.
And as a follow-up on the financing piece, is that specifically with the state, or is it at some point handed over to another lending agency such as HUD or other mechanism? How does that work?
For the financing, for the
Yes,
state
sir.
financing, it'll be directly through the state and an allocation.
So the state will hold it?
Yes, at North Carolina Housing Finance Agency will actually oversee it.
On the left side.
Right here?
Yep.
Okay. It seems like this meeting is coming after the fact of the decisions being made by our city council to bring you in here and also to provide the location, which seems backwards. The citizens, one, we haven't seen the official study that you've done, and I think we should have had access to that. And I would agree, there's a lot of no confidence within our city leadership. And the transparency piece, this, to me, does not meet transparency. Also, across the street, it's a brownfield. And I know we discussed that earlier, but, you know, why a brownfield when Crossing's at 64, which we've invested in tax dollars? It's my understanding, Ms. Dickens, I think do we not have infrastructure there? I was under the impression that there was infrastructure at Crossing's at 64. And
the major issue at Crossing is housing finance has a 2-mile requirement for a grocery store and a pharmacy. And Food Line is a little bit further than 2 miles. We've been trying to get.
well, do you have infrastructure there such
We
as
have-
water, sewer? Because I was being told
Yes.
earlier that you didn't have infrastructure there.
No, infrastructure is there. It's an 85-acre site, 30 acres we're working on, and there's water and sewer is there, and there is roadway there for almost 15 acres yet.
Okay, so there is water, sewer already there, so why was that out of the question? And then
Because
the
the
other,
housing finance is the requirement.
I understand the grocery store, but we also have another 85, you said 85 acres. Hell, we can build a grocery store there. I'm sure someone, if you're gonna have.
Who can? Who can? Build it. Build it.
Over there. And we also have studies that were done both for ratio, and we also have a study that was done for the Tiger grant that it was a federal grant that we did not qualify for, we're not chosen for. But that area over there is not for housing, for workforce housing. We have invested tons of money in the event center, in Main Street, and we have people that come invested their money here. The college built this building that we're sitting in here because of promises made. So it's going to be a combination. My question is kind of between y'all and the city. Because, but the main thing is, why do you come to the public first? Why do y'all go into closed meetings and have these choices before the citizens have an opportunity to have a say-so? That's just wrong, and y'all being the UNC School of Government should advise the city and say transparency is paramount in getting the public trust and getting buy-in.
I think that's a very good question. And the reason why is because we didn't actually secure final financing until January of this year. So the problem with going out in our process and saying, hey, public, this is all the work we're doing, this is the development we're doing, but we don't actually have any money to do this, is that we're making false promises. And so we did wait for a point in which we knew that financing was in place so that we can come to you and actually talk about a feasible project, because that is the priority.
That's the way you do it.
I will say we have given public meetings. We did present our market analysis to the council last year, so that was a public presentation to council. This isn't the first time that we've been in front of council. I think this is now the third time. We presented at the retreat. We had one closed meeting when we did the market analysis that was public. We had a piece of that was closed session. And the reason why is if we talk about private property, which is something that we did do, it's not fair to the public and taxpayers who would be investing in these properties and to the private to be talking about that publicly. And so that's why we would go into closed session. This site, the money, this all really just happened in January, and we've moved as quickly as we possibly could to get this in front of you. We also didn't want to come here and say, hey, there's this site, when the council wasn't prepared to even consider it. And so we needed all the pieces in place so we could come to you and you now have in front of you, you know what you're responding to. There's no developer in place. That hasn't happened yet. But you now know exactly the opportunity that's in front of you. And you can make a choice based on that, and you can speak to your council and your city based on this information.
They'll make the decision, and not us, will we have anything, will the people have anything to say about it, or will the council make all the decision?
Well, I'll say speak to your representatives, because at the end of the day, they were elected to make these decisions, so we do defer to them.
Thanks. Amen.
One of the things we have around here is a lot of absent-minded people. Because I've heard about this for about a year, so I don't know where everybody else was at. That hit me. Maybe you need to get involved in more about what's going on in the city, and you'll know about it, all right? We've been getting bits and pieces about this for quite a while. Now, it's like a lot of other things that go on around here that we want to control, right? It's got to be our way at our time. Well, it doesn't work like that anymore. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's control. There are certain things that the people elect certain people to control for. We call that the city council. And we let them control certain things for us. It's called the government. All right? And that's what we expect for them to do. And if we find cause that they don't do that, then we step in. It's called vote. You know, that's quite practical. That's the way it's supposed to work. Then we, as citizens of Rocky Mountain, don't have to try to run our homes and the city. You see? And then this stuff about we don't have confidence in our government, you can't speak for me. You see, my parents sent me to school and helped me learn to speak so I can speak for myself.
Better tell it.
I'm happy with my government. That's why I go to the polls. Each time it's a voting time. And I put the check for who I want to represent me. And I don't know about any of these people who saying, we're dissatisfied with the government. You can say you are, but you can't say we are. Because when you say we are, you're talking about me. You can't speak for me. I'm a grown man. Now, people, please speak for yourself. And quit saying that this was done behind closed doors, because I know I haven't been behind no closed doors, and I've been knowing about it for quite a while. If you don't know about it, it's your fault. Get involved.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. I want to be respectful of people's time and make sure folks that haven't had a chance to speak get a chance to. This gentleman back here with the glasses.
I pretty much decided that I wasn't going to say anything. But I think that one thing does need to be said. Having sat in any number of meetings related to discussions of affordable housing, I would say I could count the number of people in this room who chose to sit in those meetings. I don't know why everybody's here tonight, but I think that there's a lot of division, and we shouldn't say that there's a lot of unity, because there isn't. Yes, some of these discussions very well could have taken place at an earlier point in time. The city was 3 years into its affordable housing plan before these kinds of things started getting discussed. So there is a lot of anxiety about what decisions are going to be made, why they're made, and so forth. But there's also a need for communication between communities in this community. And we shouldn't wind up having these debates over issues that are really our community issues. Why don't we meet in broader, with a broader, diverse group when we're talking about these city issues? It just doesn't happen. But this isn't, you can't resolve it here. These are things that should have already taken place. And I didn't see a lot of you talking about the problems we were having getting the affordable housing plan adopted and prioritized. This is the 3rd or 4th year of the plan, and we're just talking about it being a priority. So just let's talk about, we need to talk after the meeting.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah, I'd like to get back to the actual subject of why we're here, and thank you for coming. You shouldn't have been exposed to this. However, when you put out the RFP for the developer, are you able to determine the facade or the architecture? You know, that's some of the concerns, I think, of what's going to be over there. Is this going to be or is it going to fit in? What control do we have over that? And making sure that something's actually going to fit into the area from that.
You have a lot of control over that, because once a developer is selected, there has to be an MOU negotiated and a development agreement. And through that process, DFI and the city and NCOR will require design plans to be fleshed out. And as part of our work, we want the public to have a say, hey, this doesn't fit with downtown. And so that will be part of that. And also part of any city planning process that is required, there will still be a public planning process.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they're not just going to put up whatever they want there and it be.
Mm-hmm.
One other. I'm sorry. Excuse me. I have been enlightened. I needed to know more about affordable housing, so I thank you for being here. This will not be the last study I do. I will require myself to learn more about it. And I would say my first knee-jerk reaction is I'm not opposed to affordable housing. I don't want anyone to think that that is an issue, at least for me, and I bet it's not for a lot of people in the room. But I've been to presentations like this before. I followed the consultants when they came and talked about the event center for Rocky Mount. And I was told, you know, if you build it, they will come. And there was a major push for us to believe that the event center had to be in the center city, that research showed that it needed to be in the center city so that people would come to there and everywhere else in our city. I'm hearing tonight, oddly enough, the same pitch is being given for something else, in this case, affordable housing. Many of you know that, if you know who I am, that I wrote you and said, I'm opposed to the event center. We trusted our government, thank you. We trusted them. They voted it into being a reality. And then those of us who were opposed needed to get on board. If we were going to have it, we needed to make sure it was a success. My argument against affordable housing on that property is that we've got to take care of what we have already invested lots and lots of money in. And I think the signals I'm getting is, well, I think it needs all the help we can get. I think our event center needs all the help we can get. The total blunder, because I'm a nice lady and I won't call it what I really want to say,
Say it.
is that
Grown.
to go that far in the project and find out that we've got 300 and some odd parking spaces for a facility that we were told to believe in and that we are trying to attract thousands of people to monthly, that is a total blunder. And we have got to make sure that one thing is a success before we move on to another. We all need to be this way. We all need to be committed to first things first. And I know there's got to be some other place that we can look at this affordable housing. I'm not opposed to looking at that, but this is too centrally located, too perfectly located to the event center to pass this off. Thank you.
I want to be respectful of folks' time. One last comment and then we'll close, but we will be here to answer your questions and talk more in depth.
Y'all be here all night now.
Yes, I wanted to ask more about.
Crazy folk.
You said how many units? 60. So potentially, how many people could be in those units?
It's a
Maximum and minimum?
Yeah, it's a mix of studio, 1 and 2 bedrooms. A studio, you would fit typically 1, 1.5, as I say. A 1-bedroom up to 2, a couple, and a 3-bedroom. I mean, a 2-bedroom, sorry, 1 bedroom, a couple, up to a couple, 2-bedroom, a couple, and a child, for example.
And so is there any play area or anything for you?
No, not necessarily, because you could also have 2 single households, 2 single people in 1 household.
No, what kind of like amenities?
So we're talking about, there's a gathering space. And what that'll actually look like and what's available there, that's something that'll be developed as part of the design process.
Yes, there will be amenities like.
There will be. It's 1.3 acres.
And you put in 60 units?
Yes.
One floor.
Over 3 floors.
And
Y'all want to answer my question about the brownfield?
Oh, Jesus.
He's saying that's a brownfield.
You have dry cleaners there and it's.
Yes, and they've done the phase 1 and phase 2. There are restrictions on well water, but this won't be on well water. This will be on the city's water. As part of this, there'll also be another environmental review. We have padded the development budget with a little bit extra for remediation, any additional barriers that are needed. But based on the phase 1 and phase 2 environmental studies that were done, the major restriction will just be that well water. Fact sheets, fine, my bag. So I've got some fact sheets that we'll have available that you can grab on your way out if you would like. I'm also here to answer more questions.
They're going to tell the fact sheets all the truth.
And my contact information is on the fact sheet as well.
Can't have what?
Can't have well water. That's not the point, though. I thought, what happens like environmental races? They're always building housing projects. Bad land. It ain't bad land.